Welcome to our first Fireside chat on encryption, national security, cybersecurity, and you. Why are we doing this? Because we think it's good to demystify these topics a little bit. All of us, including you out there, use encryption 20, 30 times a day, whether you know it or not. Logging into your bank account, using a credit card, you're using encryption. You may not think about it.
Sending secret messages to your handler at the foreign embassy that's employed you secretly. Yep.
Exactly.
Some of you anyway.
For our friends at NSA, we're just joking with that. But we wanted to give some context and let you know about some future threats that are coming and some ways that your companies or your government might want to help you with that. And I am so pleased to be joined today by my friend, David Kris.
Well, it's a great pleasure to be here, Bryan. And for those of you who don't know Bryan, that small number of you out there, Bryan is a former career CIA officer and a national security and cybersecurity lawyer of great renown. He was the deputy legal advisor at the National Security Council inside the White House when Condoleezza Rice was national security advisor, executive director of the UC Irvine Cybersecurity Policy and Research Institute, principal contributor to the first national security strategy to secure cyberspace, and founding member of the very successful effort to create the first cybersecurity standard for implantable medical devices, which was recently adopted by the IEEE. So Bryan has been there, done that, and has got the t-shirt, okay?
Thank you, David. Another way to look at that is I can't hold a job. I am so pleased to be joined by my friend, the Honorable David S. Kris, President Obama's first Assistant Attorney General for National Security, confirmed 97-0. Cheers.
That wouldn't happen today,
nope,
but you know,
not to you.
Times
not
have
to
changed.
David served as a career lawyer in the Department of Justice, National Security Division, and elsewhere, Criminal Division and elsewhere.
Yep.
Also served as vice president for Time Warner and as general counsel to a major intellectual property firm. Literally wrote the book on national security law. Still available?
It's still available on Thomson West's website, and it's a non-narcotic sleep aid guaranteed not to be habit-forming.
These days, David is the founding principal of Culper Partners, a strategic public policy, security, geopolitics, and communications consulting firm, and my friend and colleague for going on 3 decades.
Hot
Welcome.
diggity. Thank you.
Welcome to our first Fireside chat. Now look, as we know, encryption of sensitive data today is one of the hottest topics in security,
It is.
particularly given the recent White House and National Institute of Standards and Technology orders and drafts on regulations warning against the threat to every single type of encryption from anticipated developments in quantum computing.
Yeah.
But such debates can seem esoteric at best and meaningless, at worst without being put in the proper context. So that's what we're going to try to do today. So David, let's talk about, first of all, President Biden's somewhat extraordinary executive order on quantum resistant encryption. Now, as you and I know, an executive order is perhaps not as difficult as getting legislation passed, but it's a very heavy lift.
Non-trivial, yes, exactly.
And they don't do it for things that they don't see as a real threat. So what do you see as the threat from quantum computing?
I mean, so you're absolutely right. Just to validate the premise of the question, there is an enormous amount of energy being put into this whole thing by the Biden administration. They are very focused on it. They have very, very senior people at the White House in the departments and agencies, and they are operating in directives at the presidential level, national security memos and executive orders. So this is like of the first order of importance with the highest amount of force and energy behind it. And what they're worried about here, and they ought to be worried about it, is that at some point, somebody, hopefully us, possibly our geopolitical adversaries, are gonna develop a quantum computer that really functions at a high level. And it is going to be able, potentially, to break the encryption algorithms that have been used for years and years to encrypt almost all of the world's encrypted and sensitive information. Now, there are levels and levels of encryption out in the world, but there are these standards of encryption that are used for all the commercial data Bryan talked about at the beginning. You log in to buy something on Amazon, you do your online banking. There's a lot of stuff that depends on encryption, and there is a lot of, I think, justifiable concern that at some point, Is it going to be next week? Is it going to be, 2 years from now? Is it going to be 10 years from now?
Was it yesterday?
Yeah, right.
Some secret laboratory in Beijing.
I thought we agreed we wouldn't talk about that. At some point, if it hasn't happened already, somebody is going to develop the computing power to break those encryption algorithms. And at that point, that information is going to be exposed. And if we don't have new encryption methods available to us, we are going to be in a very sorry state indeed.
Yeah, and as we'll talk about in a few minutes, we're talking about all types of encrypted data. Data streaming back and forth in real time, data that has been stored, even if it's years or decades ago, and data that is used to establish that you are who you say you are and I'm who I say I am on the internet, so that we can securely communicate. But let's pull the lens back a little bit, or jump in a time machine for a minute, because the question why encryption matters and why we want to talk about it, the answer has not always been as clear as it seems today, at least to us. In 1929, after World War I, the U.S. Secretary of State Henry Stimson famously shut down the entire United States Department of State code-breaking office. And we should say, in 1929, there was no CIA or NSA, so that was our code-breaking activities. And he very famously said, "Gentlemen don't read other gentlemen's mail."
Yes. Well, look, spies are maybe the second oldest profession or whatever, and spy versus spy and encryption. You can go back to Roman times, and there are encryption issues and spying issues going on, but it's definitely had its ups and downs. And in this country, it's been more or less aggressively practiced through the 20th century and beyond.